Relationship Resources, Declaring War on Divorce by Dr. Jim A. Talley. Trait B, Depressive versus Lighthearted. Definition, Trait B, Depressive versus Lighthearted. Depressive is here defined as being pessimistic, discouraged, or dejected in feeling, tone, or manner. Its opposite, lighthearted, is characterized by a happy, cheerful, and optimistic attitude or disposition. A. The questions in this category are designed to measure depressive states and reactions directly and to measure depressive tendencies indirectly, as indicated through certain other attitudes. B. The items that directly measure depressive states or reactions include feelings of apathy, despondency, disillusionment, or pessimism, depressive preoccupation with life, problems, or misfortunes, emotional exhaustion, and the contemplation of suicide. C. The items that provide indirect indications of depression include feelings of unwanted or of not belonging, of fearfulness, or of being unimportant or unappreciated, as well as tendencies to be easily disheartened by criticism and discouraged because of a lack of self-confidence or a sense of inferiority. D. Lightheartedness, in contrast, is indicated by a sense of well-being and optimism, a conviction that life is worthwhile, and the tendency to laugh and smile readily. E. Comment. Depressive is found to correlate positively with nervous. An improvement in either trait appears to improve the other. Depression tends to damage or destroy all sense of well-being and obviously lowers personal, social, scholastic, and vocational effectiveness. It tends to reduce hope, ambition, and motivation. F. High nervous and high depressive scores are usually evident of persons seeking psychological assistance. While the cause of this pattern is frequently found to be psychological in nature, medical experimentation and cooperation may be advisable. This condition may result from some immediate crisis, or it may indicate underlying conflicts that have not been resolved. Nervousness and depression are generally symptomatic indicators that are difficult to change until the underlying source can be determined. G. When the depressive score is extremely high and self-discipline is low, caution is indicated. Medical or psychiatric assistance may be advisable or necessary, especially when the history reveals self-destructive tendencies or the treatment of them is in any way evident. Explanation of scores. A. Excellent. The darkest color blue. A TJTA score is the excellent range indicates that you see yourself as a happy and cheerful person who does not take himself too seriously. You are usually optimistic about life, are expecting the best, are working to make it happen, and are not too easily discouraged. You can take defeat in stride because you are capable of being objective enough to honestly look at the causes and then do something to correct them. Others may see you as ambitious or at least satisfied with your accomplishments in life. You find it easy to laugh, even to laugh at yourself. Your score indicates that you have a good, happy childhood, particularly in those areas that count most, love and acceptance from others, and thus the ability to accept yourself. This gave you the feeling that you were a person of worth. As a result, you became the kind of person who can cope with life's problems. Some of your close friends may think you take life too flippantly and that you should be more serious. While you don't want to be flippant, think through their criticism constructively. Their comments may come from your friend's own insecurities, and thus you are being looked at with envy or with a need for self-assurance from you. One problem you may encounter in interpersonal relationships is that others who are more depressed will often think you don't understand. Be careful with that. With all your self-confidence and good self-image, you do not fail to recognize the needs of others. You may hurt them if you do not take their problem as seriously as they wish. B. Acceptance. Medium blue. A score in the acceptable range indicates that you see yourself as a happy and cheerful person who doesn't take himself too seriously. You are usually optimistic about life, expecting the best and working to make it happen, and you are not too easily discouraged. You can take defeat in stride because you are capable of being objective enough to honestly look at the causes and then do something to correct them. Others may see you as ambitious or at least satisfied with your accomplishments in life. You find it easy to laugh, even to laugh at yourself. One of the problems that you will encounter in interpersonal relationships is that others who are more depressed will often think you do not understand them. Be careful that you do not fail to recognize the needs of others. You may hurt them if you do not take their problems as seriously as they wish. C. Improvement desirable. Pale blue. This score is a measure of depressive states or reactions. Direct indicators of depressive states include feelings of apathy, despondency, disillusionment, pessimism, depressive preoccupation with problems, emotional exhaustion, and contemplation of suicide. Indirect indications of depression are feelings of being unwanted, of not belonging, of fearfulness of being unimportant or unappreciated, of being easily disheartened by criticism, and of being discouraged because of a sense of inferiority or a lack of self-confidence. Depression is not a sin, but it tends to reduce hope, ambition, and motivation. You find criticism to be threatening because of a lack of self-confidence and uncertainty as to your true identity. Be on the watch for self-pity or feeling sorry for yourself and that life has somehow shortchanged you. You are being too hard on yourself and you are your own worst critic. All of the above mentioned things are self-defeating and destroy hope, ambition, and motivation. Very often feelings of inferiority or guilt, as well as unresolved hostility, can create a feeling of depression. You have a problem with a low self-image and self-identity. You may have trouble establishing goals for yourself. You do not always see yourself as a capable person and therefore get down in the dumps. Causes of depression may include poor eating habits, not enough rest or exercise, reaction to medications, repressed anger and anger turned inward, reaction to grief, endocrine imbalance, self-pity, woe is me, self-blame, guilt, faulty behavior, moral code, negative mindset, self-image, negative depressive environment. A depressed mood may in itself be a normal phenomenon. After an experience of loss or a hurt to an individual's self-esteem, a sense of futility and lowered self-worth is to be expected. Depression is an attempt to overcome or repair that loss. At this moment, pause and complete the first section of the worksheet on page 5. Articles, Trait B, Depressive and Lightheartedness. Suggestions for decreasing depression. 1. We are likely to feel depressed when we are physically run down, over-fatigued, or ill, cannot do what we want to do, cannot get what we want and need, feel guilty over something that we have done or left undone, have lost someone we love, have gone from a situation where we were happy to one that seems to hold no promise, or have been hurt by someone. Feel inferior, unloved, lonely, and as though we have nothing to offer others. 2. According to many research studies, most, if not all, human beings have swings in mood. For some of us, these swings are so minor we hardly notice the difference. For others, the swings are more extreme. Most women have another emotional cycle in relation to their menstrual cycle. Number 3. When these low cycles coincide, or when immediate disappointments and difficulties come at the down point of our cycle, we tend to be more depressed than we would during our usual cycle. 4. If you had noticed your own swings in mood, it might help to keep a record of them for a while. Then you will be prepared for your downswings and will be able to take them more in your stride, knowing that it will not be long before your mood swings up again. 5. If you want to be less depressed, Recognize that depression is often simply a sign of psychological need for rest and refreshment after a period of strain, and obey this sign as you would the sign of pain or hunger. Go to bed and sleep as many hours as you can and want to. You may awaken feeling fine. Check to see if you could be experiencing premenstrual depression, and if so, take it easy. Relax as much as you can, and don't try to force yourself to do unnecessary things that will cause tension. If depression lasts, have a physical checkup and tell your physician about your depressed feelings. 6. Find the cause of your depression if possible. If there is a possibility that the cause may be physical, follow the suggestions in Section 1 above. Check over the list in Section 1 to see if you recognize any of these causes. Think back over what has happened in the day or two before your depression started. If the depression has lasted over a period of time, think back over what happened in the week before it started. See if you can spot the cause or causes. 7. Express your grief openly, at least to yourself. Recognize and accept your loss, disappointment, or the conditions that are causing the depression. If there is an immediate cause, bereavement, disappointment, or similar loss or hurt, get off by yourself and cry it out. Crying does not undo or change the situation, of course, but it changes you. Crying is a psychological and emotional release that will ease your tension and often relieve the depression. After you have cried, you will find that you are able to think things through much more clearly and to handle the changed circumstances effectively. If you have a sympathetic, understanding, and mature friend, express your grief, disappointment, or hurt to her. If the cause is less immediate and specific, write out how you feel in detail, why you feel that way, and everything that comes to your mind in relation to your feelings. If you feel like crying while you are doing this, go ahead and cry. If your depression is caused by relatively minor events, try acting out your feelings in front of a mirror to see if that helps. Sometimes, while acting it out, we begin to see the humor in the situation, and the depression may disappear in a burst of laughter. However, this suggestion is justification for only one or a very few thoroughgoing expressions. If you find that you continue to express your sorrow and despair over and over again, try to break the pattern. Say to yourself, "I've expressed my feelings fully. That is over. Now let's turn to something else." 8. If possible, see if you can find some way to modify or remove the cause of your depression. Can you figure out how to get what you want, or how you can arrange things so that you can do what you want to do in some other way? If not, can you find a good substitute? Do you really want what you think you want, or is a desire that has been frustrated only means to an end that you could achieve in some other way? If you feel sorry over having hurt someone or having done something you wish you hadn't, is there anything you can do to make the person feel better, make up for the hurt, or change the effect of what you have done? If so, do it as soon as you can. If not, can you accept what you have done as an error, such as human beings make in learning and growing? Learn from it and go on from there. If you have lost someone, or changed to a less happy situation, or have been hurt, is there anyone else with whom you could build a close friendship? Not as a substitute, but as a new expression of warmth, companionship, and love that we all need. Is there any way you can get closer to the person who has hurt you? Understand that person better and avoid future hurts through understanding rather than shutting out the person from your love. If you feel as though you have nothing to offer, can you think of something you can do for someone? If you can, do it, even if it's only a little thing like a smile or a small service. 9. Experiment to see if you can break the spell of depression. Through the years, human beings have found peace, hope, and new joy in great art, painting, music, literature, and architecture, and in the great philosophical and religious writings. Make sure that at least 2 or 3 such resources of the kind that touch you most deeply are available to you so that you can turn to them during moods of depression. Experiment with physical activity, dancing, or sports, especially outdoor sports, to see if your depression may not be blown away through involvement in intense physical exercise. Revive some old interests other than those mentioned, such as collecting favorite items or reading about and planning a trip, or emulate some friends, joining him or her and delving into his or her hobbies. Try being with friends to see if conversation, closeness with other human beings, and the interest of the moment will resolve the depression. Experiment to see if acting happy will help. This evidently works for some people, especially if the depression is not too deep. Smile, straighten your shoulders, take a deep breath and walk with a spring, whistle, or sing. Discover whether consciously putting in the external signs of happiness will arouse happy feelings in you. Changes of tempo and outlook are often helpful. Change the focus of your eyes from nearby objects to the distance. Do something different, even if it's only changing the topic of conversation. Strive to change the activity of the moment and see if new interest will engage your attention so completely as to resolve your depression. See if you can catch yourself clinging to the depression. If you are doing so, then find a friend who will kid you out of it. Try acting happy or overact your depression before a mirror and see if you won't soon resolve it in laughter. 10. If none of these things works well, relax and let it happen, realizing that this too will pass, as moods do. Think back to times before you felt depressed and hopeless, and remember how the depression was resolved in awakenings, interest, and happiness. Be confident that your feelings of depression are temporary and take advantage of it to rest. Arrange your busyness and necessary activities so that you need to do only the very necessary minimum during this period of depression. Allow yourself the luxury of resting, eating abundantly, and sleeping as much as you wish for a short while. But do some mildly active, undemanding work during every day. Gardening, housework, walking, straightening out clothes and bureaus, and so on. If you can get away for a short trip for a few days, do it. Rest, relax, and pamper yourself. If you can go to a beautiful, quiet place where you can lose yourself in the nature world and begin to feel yourself a part of the vast rhythm of the universe, it will help most. If you have to continue a daily routine, take it as easy as possible and turn to a great art, philosophy, religion, and the natural beauties of your own area to arouse a feeling of being a part of the universe. 11. Many women have prolonged periods of depression during the menopause, and men have similar periods during their 50s and 60s. Such depression is due partly to psychological changes that are taking place, often resulting in endocrine imbalance, partly to changes in living as children reach adulthood and go off on their own, and partly deeper emotional stresses extenuate by the approach of old age and the decrease of sexual potency. If you think your depression may be related to these factors, see your physician. He may be able to give you medicine and other treatments that will relieve the depression. Find other interests to take the place of your children in your life. Explore the many possibilities for valuable and useful contributions to society that will make you feel part of your community and further enrich your experience. Seek the help of a counselor in getting at and resolving deeper emotional stress. Now is the time when you are at last free to do all the things that you have been putting off for years. Do some traveling you've been promising yourself. Begin a new hobby or develop an artistic expression that you've never had time for until now. Overcoming Depression by Maurice E. Wagner. Nobody seems to understand me is a frequent complaint of persons who suffer from depression. I ought to be able to shake this horrible feeling, but I just can't. Other people feel they should overcome these feelings too, for depression seems to be a very contagious emotion. Advice is often given to them, but they don't seem to be able to profit by it. The truth is that depressed people are among the most misunderstood people alive. Christians can be depressed as well as non-Christians. The difference is that Christians usually feel guiltier for their depression. It is as though being depressed indicated they were failing in their Christian living, or that they were guilty of some sin which made God displeased with them or unreal to them. It is really no sin to be depressed, and one only complicates his symptoms when he allows himself to feel guilty for his condition. God can and does deliver his children from their depressions, but it is vitally important for the victim to face his problem realistically, have understanding, and pray intelligently. There is a deliverance from depression available for Christians that non-Christians cannot understand until they become converted. But many Christians also are not aware of this resource or the dynamics of their problem, and so they continue in their misery without significant help. There are many types of depression, ranging from a brief mood dip to a long-time loss of interest in life. The problem has a multitude of variations. Sometimes a person may be depressed over a spiritual problem, but usually it is emotional and not spiritual in origin. A person's physical condition can have a great influence on the feelings of depression. Medical counsel should always be sought whenever one's depression becomes a problem. Suicidal ideas often accompany depression, and these ideas can be very threatening and should never be taken lightly. Many victims of depression are accused of trying to get attention, but this is far from the truth most of the time. They are actually in distress, but are not understood. Some are depressed for short periods of time, perhaps a few days each month, while others are depressed most of the time. When one man was asked if he were ever depressed, he replied, "No, I never get depressed. I always am depressed. I only leave my depression for a few moments at a time." One of our basic motivations is to satisfy personal desires. Sometimes we get what we want, other times we do not. Depending on how we interpret our failures, let us classify personalities into two general categories. One, we will label externalized, for this type of person is usually inclined to blame himself for his failures. The externalized type of personality is usually aggressive and forward, rather fearless. He is characterized by his interest in things outside himself. He becomes depressed when he is confronted with a severe embarrassment that leaves him with no apparent way to recover his feelings of status. When an externalized person becomes depressed, his behavior will be characterized by the following traits. 1. He feels overcome by circumstances. He feels cornered. 2. He shows little fear, though some anxiety. He tries to be optimistic, though he may have trouble doing so. Though he may be deeply depressed, he seldom seems to lose his sense of identity as a person. If the situation continues to be hopeless so that he cannot recover his lost ego, he may turn his hostility on himself and be suicidal. He may talk the language of one who wants to change his attitudes towards the situation, but in reality he may be also hoping that his critics will accept his remorse for guilt and his good intentions as a promise of change. He may have strong feelings of hostility and be most insensitive to the feelings of others when he expresses them. If he cannot or dares not express them, he may repress them to avoid facing them. The internalized type of person, on the other hand, is usually inclined to blame himself for his failure. He has a poor self-concept and seems to secretly believe he is defective in some way. He is usually fearful, timid, and overly cautious. He becomes depressed when rejected in some way, especially when it is by someone from whom he wants to approve. He has deep feelings of resentment that he is afraid to express, but at the same time he blames himself for them. He tries vigorously to maintain an image of perfection to win praise from others, and when this fails, he concludes that all hope is lost. Prayer is often unrewarding and unreal. Frequently, it adds to his despair, for he feels that God has forsaken him. His depression is characterized by the following traits. 1. He is overcome by his inability to face circumstances. 2. He has strong guilt feelings and is often angry with himself. 3. He sometimes has a subtle way of pitying himself for his situation. He is strongly inclined to be pessimistic. 4. He loses his sense of personal identity in his cloud of self-condemnation and confusion. 5. He has great fear and anxiety over the future as well as the present. The temptation and threat of suicide are real and very real to him. Most people who suffer from depression have had a lack of meaningful love in childhood. Therefore, a serious study of God's love as revealed in the Bible is found to be most helpful. The book of 1 John is excellent to read through at one sitting and many times. Also helpful are 1 Corinthians 13, Romans 8, John 14 and 15, and Ephesians. Fear and anxiety are abated with a consciousness of the presence of the risen Christ. Read Joshua 1 through 9, Psalm 42, Isaiah 41:10, Luke 12:7, 2 Timothy 1:7, 1 John 4:18, and Revelation 1:17 and 18. Guilt feelings are harder to overcome for the depressive person because he has difficulty differentiating between two condemning emotions. One is a sense of failing to measure up to the image of perfection he carries for himself as a Christian person. The other is a sense of disobedience to some definite instruction in God's words. The source of this first emotion is entirely within him. The source of the other emotion is centered outside himself in God's word. If the person can pinpoint some violation of God's word, he has real guilt and can intelligently find relief from 1 John 1:9. If he tries to apply that promise and does not find relief from the sense of guilt, he should not conclude that God has forsaken him. Instead, he should realize that the guilt problem is entirely subjective, that is, bottled within him. He should stop praying for forgiveness and pray rather for better insight. He needs to understand where God's commands end and his secret ambitions for himself begin. Hostility feelings also need understanding. The feelings of hate, resentment, and anger fall into two general categories. One category includes those hostile feelings that come quickly to mind when we think of certain situations that irritate us. The other category includes those hostile feelings that lie buried deep in the subconscious and not readily brought to mind. Many of them are so repressed as to require deep therapy to uncover them. But though we are not immediately conscious of them, they have a way of influencing our attitudes, moods, and emotional stability. Conscious hostility can be resolved in the light of Matthew 6:12 through 15 and Ephesians 4:31 and 32. As we resolve conscious hostility, we make room for some of the subconscious feelings to come to the surface. As time goes on and we resolve the hate feelings as they appear, we perform a cleansing process which relieves most of the basic obstacles to the Holy Spirit's using us and ministering his attributes through us. Galatians 5:22 and 23. New habits can and must be developed. Habits of thinking and habits of reacting to unpleasant situations. Colossians 3:10 through 17. Life itself can be reoriented around a new center, a center where love is the dominant emotion and directed towards new goals of eternal significance. See 2 Corinthians 5:14 through 17 and Philippians 3:7 through 14.